I can't prove that this is true. No one I've told believes me, and I'm really just tired of telling this story
Mhm.
and getting into the inevitable dates over plausibility. But I know what happened and figured the community here may at least have more of an open mind about the experience. If anything, I can at least get the whole story written out without being ridiculed. About a year and a half ago, I started going to college. After filling out lots of forms and doing a bunch of things to get it in, I finally got a letter telling me I'd been accepted. My first choice was UGA, and they accepted me, which was great. But another college, Kennesaw State University, also accepted me. This school wasn't as famous as UGA, but it was still one of the biggest in Georgia. However, I hadn't even visited it. I just sent in an application, going through the motions. So I thought I should at least give the place a fair chance, and I decided to visit the campus before making a final decision. The day was rainy, and the university grounds were full of mud and wet spots on the freshly planted grass. There were only a few of us in the tour group since it was close to the fall registration deadline, and the tour ended early because the light rain turned into a heavy downpour. I wasn't happy with the limited view of the campus, so I decided to explore on my own. Luckily, I had a spare poncho in my car, which I put on before walking around. Thunder rumbled above, and the rain got heavier, as if it was trying to stop me from going on. But I kept going, exploring more of the campus. As I wandered through the buildings of the small campus,
Mhm.
noticed that all the buildings I reached were closed. It seemed strange because it was still summer. Shouldn't classes be in session? And the student body seemed non-existent. That wasn't a big deal due to the terrible storm, but it still felt strange. I hadn't seen a single person since the tour group dispersed. Eventually, I made my way to one of the dorm areas called University Place. It was a small group of dorms that looked like apartments but were far from the main campus, almost hidden away. I found shelter under an overhang to briefly escape the rain. A poncho can only do so much when it's pouring. That's when I noticed that one of the dorm doors was wide open. I walked past it, trying not to be too obvious, but I glanced inside. There was no one there, but I saw a TV against the wall that was on. Normally, I wouldn't intrude, but I was determined to see more of the campus up close. I walked to the door, knocked on the wall inside, yelling to see if anyone was there, and no response. I knocked again, took a step inside. Still no response. I decided to take a look around the living room, and I left my poncho and wet shoes at the doorway. I called out once more as I entered the main living area, but still there was no answer. I looked at the TV, which was showing static, but there was no sound. I walked over and turned it off, and it seemed like the place was empty but showed signs of life. There was an open pizza box with food inside on a table in the living room, but it was infested with flies as if it had been left alone for days. As I walked through the room, I noticed a terrible smell like rotting meat. Part of me told me to leave, but another part insisted I keep going. I cautiously moved toward the smell, which became stronger as I got closer. I reached the kitchen sink and found what I'd feared: rotting meat infested with maggots. It was disgusting and disturbing. I nearly vomited from the sight and smell, quickly leaving the kitchen, only to realize that the TV was back on. Maybe it was some odd setting on the TV that made it turn back on. At this point, I was getting pretty creeped out. I turned the TV off again and I even unplugged it from the wall. I decided it was a good time to leave and started heading for the still open doorway. That's when I heard a thump, much louder this time. It came from the room near the doorway, labeled A. Now, I've seen enough scary movies to know that you don't go toward the noise. You run away from it. So that's what I did. I went straight for the door, grabbed my poncho, and got ready to leave. Suddenly, the door slammed shut right in front of me, as if it closed on its own. I nearly fell over from the sudden movement and quickly backed away. I stared in astonishment, trying to understand what had just happened. I rushed forward, trying to turn the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the door was locked from the other side. I pounded on it and yelled for help, desperately twisting the doorknob. I reached into my pocket to call someone on my phone, only to see that there was no signal. That was not good. Eventually, I gave up, looking around the room for another way out. I since realized that the actual dorm rooms had windows, which I could maybe use to escape. My heart was pounding, and I realized that something was seriously wrong here. Was it a prank gone bad? Was someone deliberately trying to scare me? If so, it was working. Then I heard another thump, even louder this time, still coming from that room. As much as I didn't want to go near it, that room seemed like it might have someone in it, and that was my best chance of getting out. I got up and approached the door, noticing that the TV was on again, showing static even though it was still unplugged. I ignored the TV. My only concern was getting out. I knocked on the door once and waited, but there was no response. I knocked again, called out, and still nothing. I grabbed the doorknob and turned it. Feeling the door give way as I pushed it open slowly. The room was dark, and the outside weather made it impossible to see much beyond the vague outlines of furniture. A bed and a desk, with some small objects here and there. I called out, trying to figure out if someone was there, but there was no response. I flicked the light switch, but nothing happened. I tiptoed into the room toward the window. It was my way out, and I thought of nothing else. Until the blankets on the bed moved, I jumped, backing against the wall. Hello, I called out in response. Are you okay? I asked what I thought was the dorm's occupant, but there was still no answer. I reached toward the bed and pulled the covers off. Slowly, I uncovered a man who looked about my age. His eyes and mouth soon shut. Dried blood caked around both openings. He was naked and had a strange symbol carved into his chest with more blood around it. He stared at him, unsure of what I was seeing. Then his head turned, twisting toward me, and he let out a small moan that sent shivers down my spine. I quick tossed,